One of my viewers suggested that it would take some time before we get back to normality after the burial, or the funeral, I should say, of the Queen's death, which is, of course, taking place on Monday. And I wondered what he meant by normal, because normal seems to have been changing left, right, and centre since, I don't know, since Brexit in this country, at least in a defined way, in which Brexit sort of polarised the country, those people who were for it leaving the EU and those that weren't in favour of leaving the EU. And then, of course, we had the COVID debacle, where it seemed to be perfectly normal for people to listen to the government and completely not challenge anything that was extreme, like you need to stay at home and lock yourselves up. And if you're feeling a bit ill and you might have the symptoms of COVID, don't, whatever you do, go to the hospital, which is extremely different from what you would normally do. If you had an illness, you would want to tackle that illness right at the start, because if you did that, you've got a far better chance of getting rid of the illness. But during the COVID 2 years that we had, it was advised, no, stay at home with your illness, and only when you are near to death come and bother us, which was a bit of a weird thing. It seemed to be that nowadays, whilst it used to be quite tricky and difficult to get an appointment with your doctor, now it's pretty much near impossible, thanks for us basically being locked down in our houses for 2 years and the backlog of people who need to go and see the doctor. We now can't do that. We're beginning to understand that the mainstream media and the government, who insisted that we did lock down during COVID, actually that might not have been the best policy at all, because of all the mental health issues and the various physical issues that people had, and the health conditions that were just not being seen because we ran a national COVID service. Although, of course, if you actually had COVID in the early stages, as I said just now, you weren't actually recommended to go to the hospital at all. It was only in extreme cases. Now we have people mysteriously dying in the extra deaths that seem to be happening, that nobody really wants to talk about, even though it's been made to seem perfectly normal that everybody has a particular inoculation against something, which we've never seen a mass inoculation for a very long time. Certainly not in my lifetime have I been aware of such a mass inoculation with untested or long-term tested drugs, but we're being continually advised that this is the new normal. We've had all sorts of this problems with now the fuel crisis, in which people are being told that you're going to have huge fuel bills this Christmas and over the winter period. That's risen up. The cap that the government put on our prices are so extreme that you may as well just not have a cap anymore and let the companies charge whatever they damn well like, because most people will not be able to afford these extremely high things. Businesses will be going out of business. The pubs, for example, 70% of pubs are all going to be closing down, and we won't be able to communicate with one another face to face. We've got used to dealing with things over online, for example. Conversations have been sort of quelled by the sense of not going out or having places to go and communicate with one another. The inspiration of trying to keep people working from home has now also been a bit questioned, because but that seems to be part of the new normal. People are almost fearful of meeting one another, which is a little bit daft, and businesses wanting to keep people at home, that's not the best idea either, because obviously if you are a new student or a new employee, a student coming up the ranks, or a new employee who is trying to learn, it's better to learn from people face to face. Go into the office, understand office camaraderie, getting used to dealing with people. You have much better response of making sales and dealing with people and understanding people if you see them face to face rather than through screens. And this is going on. And now, of course, we've got the death of a monarch, which just so happened to coincide with the end of this long progression of things which have challenged us, and we're going to close everything up on the Monday, on the actual state funeral, which in an ordinary life, in a normal world, would not necessarily go without a problem, but it does seem pretty weird that we're actually shutting everything down on the Monday, that people with hospital appointments are being told you're going to have your appointments rearranged. And I even heard that if you are at a certain holiday camp, they are going to send people home on that one day because everything's going to be shut down. And you just wonder, what is this new normal? We've been shunted about so much. And then there's the underlining weird things that have been happening that we've been accepting as normal. The business about not actually knowing whether a man is a man or a woman is a woman, that people on trains cannot be addressed as ladies and gentlemen because people are taking offence because they don't consider themselves either a lady or a gentleman. And this is, what is normal? That's what I want to know. What is the normality? Can we ever go back to normal? And what do you define as normal? What is normal for you? For me, normality is having a world in which you're not being battered or nudged by the government and told what to do, a world in which the police actually solve crimes and protect you from knife crimes or violence or those sort of things, that they're visible on the street, but you're not scared of them, you're friendly with them, as in the old village Bobby, but also you respect them, and you wouldn't dare spit or call them names for fear of having a cuff round the ear or a night in the station. What is normal for you? What is the normality that we're going to go back to? Or is the normality, are we being trained that a normality is just more of this being confused by events, being polarized, being continually at each other's throats, being in a situation where the government and mainstream media tell you one thing, and if you question it, like, actually, do you think that locking us down is a good policy, or that we can only have a particular inoculation to make us well, and perhaps there are already existing medicines that we can try out? If you question the science, that we're all being told that we're idiots. Is that the normal that we want? I'm not sure it's the normal I particularly want. We're also being told that this climate change crisis is above us. We're being scared that countries are going underwater, other countries are going to be on fire, that certain species are disappearing or will disappear. We're being told this not only by the mainstream media, but then a lot of people are just not bothering to listen or even believe the mainstream media, particularly after the debacle of COVID. So, of course, now the government is working with things like soap operas, like Coronation Street and EastEnders, and working with the writers of these things to get their message in the storyline that people are sitting passively watching and thinking, oh, yeah, even the characters in the favourite everyday story of country folk is being influenced by the agenda that the government wants to tell you, so that anybody who questions the science that perhaps climate change isn't really a thing, or we needn't worry about it quite so much, or are electric cars really the answer, or is solar and wind the only thing we want to consider, those characters who voice that opinion by the other characters are being shouted down so that you passively agree with the other characters rather than those that actually are questioning the science, giving you the idea that actually questioning the science is not a good thing to do. But of course all science is questioned, otherwise we would never have moved on. Why is an apple falling from a tree? We have to question it. But if you just say, well, that's it, that's the end of the story, we'd still be back, with, we just carry things. Well, what about a wheel? That would be good. No, we just carry things. Never mind having a wheel on a truck that we can put things in fact, more things in and push along. No, we just carry it by hand because we mustn't question the science. We only progress by questioning the hypotheses that people put forward. We don't just say, this is it and that's it. We're not going to do anything. And if you question it, you're an idiot. Of course, that's not the case. So what is the new normal? I want to know. If you've got an idea, I'd like to know what your normal is. What is the normal you want, the everyday person watching this? What is normal to you? Where will normality take you? What will you be doing after the funeral? And will you get back into it? Will you change? Has all of this, the last 6 years of this nonsense, changed you? Will you be using different pronouns, the they, them, him, zip, zock, zaggly, doodly, bing, bang, boggly, whatever it is, when somebody says these are my pronouns? I'm going to be changing my verbs. I'm not changing my pronouns. I'm changing my verbs to more positivity, to doing things, to getting there, to making an effort. These are the things I'm changing my verbs. I'm not changing pronouns and all this sort of rubbish. I mean, most people had never heard of blooming pronouns, had no idea what a pronoun was. But apparently this is the thing, and people are putting them into their bio or on their Twitter thing. My pronouns are... Who gives a damn what your pronouns are? What are your verbs? What's your thing you're going to do? What are your nouns? What are your adjectives? That's what I want to know. Why are you just excluding those things and excluding all the other ones? Yes, it seems to me that's a little bit naughty. Anyway, I'd like to know, what is the new normal? What is your normal? Where do you go with normality? And what are you worried about with this strange world that we're living in, that's progressing so incredibly quickly, that's come along through the digital age? What is the new normal? Will we ever get to a normal? Will the government stop interfering with our lives and telling us how we should live and the power that we should have and where we got to go? Will we ever stand up to it and say, do you know, I don't want any of this. I just want a nice, simple, quiet life. I want to get on with stuff and not have these idiots and zealots tell us exactly how we should live and do what we're told. Be interested in that. So tell me, what is the new normal to you? Let's have a look at some of the comments from yesterday and before. I have, as ever, I don't know why, every time I switch on the camera, I always get this itchy nose. I don't know whether it's the atmosphere in here or perhaps the spores on the walls that come down and grab hold of my nostrils. Have a slurp of coffee. Right, so I have a complaint. Talking about complaintness. And Malice in Punderland says, rudeness, can't abide it nowadays. And that goes for poor service too. I made several complaints to various retailers and their staff. They were rude or abrupt, and I received poor service. Usually you get an apology and a voucher if you do it via email. Yeah, in the old days, there's a book, actually. I've got a book. I wonder where it is. There's a book I've got about a chap who made a point of just complaining to companies to see what he could get. And sorry about me scratching my nose. It's just, I don't know, it's so itchy. It's beyond, maybe there's some bug in there. That's the new normal now, ladies and gentlemen. The new normal is me hooting about with my hooter. Yeah, this chap, he just wrote off and complained about mythological things to see if he could get anything, or it was done for humour, but he did actually find that he was given, I think, supplies of things, even though the company had no record of the original transaction, but he would just complain about something, and they printed it off, and it's a hilarious book. Dan Ludlow says, regarding the Battle of Britain Day, he says, has the neighbour, this is battles that we have, has the neighbour, the obnoxious neighbour, moved away? I'm not sure, because the curtains are still drawn like they always were drawn. I just haven't seen the vehicle. A friend of mine had a neighbour who didn't get on well with, and after a while realised that he hadn't seen her for a week or two. About the time he wondered why his windows were buzzing with flies. No foul play, had died watching the television. Well, there you go. And now I'm going to sneeze. Bad form, bad service. There you go. Normally, people would edit all this lot out, but I'm not one of these people. I haven't got the time to edit all the nonsense out, so I'm afraid you get a bit of real life here as I record all of this. Anthony Conti says, congratulations for you for parking ticket victory. Yes, you've got to stand up for these things, haven't you? Even as tourists, Lucy and myself had unfair parking tickets in Dover before boarding a Medi-cruise. But in Vancouver, Canada, an unfair ticket from a rude motorcycle policeman was cancelled. N fair parking LOL tickets. Yes, no idea what the last bit meant, but thank you for that. Ivan 70 says, good evening, Richard. Good evening to you. I had a battle with Camden Council. It was on a Sunday and I stopped the car in a red box. I knew there were restrictions for the box, but the sign was about 10 feet above the street level, meaning you had to get out of the car to read the sign. I have seen that you could not park there, so I got back in the car and moved to a parking bay and paid. About a week later, I got a ticket in the post. On the front of the letter was a written, please tick one of the boxes that described why you should not pay the fine. Every single box would have made me guilty of an offence, so I didn't tick any of the boxes. And on the back of the letter, there was a big box, please tell us why the fine is unfair. I filled it in explaining I asked to go to court on a Saturday 1 week before I was due in court. I received a letter saying, due to an admin error, we will not pursue the case. Please note, if you have already paid the fine, we cannot reimburse you. Sometimes you have to fight. Absolutely, that's the way it was. In fact, Julia parked on the pavement here overnight once, and the following day she found she had a ticket. Now, wouldn't ordinarily park on the pavement, but there was a sign with a big... In the UK, if you want to park somewhere, it's usually a blue sign with a big letter P on it, noting parking. Well, it had this sign with a P on it, so Julia parked on the pavement up against, it's quite a wide area, and there was clearly this big P sign, and she got a ticket. So I wrote to the council and with photographs and said, well, this is not fair, you've got a bloody parking ticket here. To say you can park, and so she has. So we're not paying this fine. I mean, it's ridiculous. You can't do one or two things, and so they let her off, and then the sign was removed very swiftly. And you think, hang on a minute. I think what had happened is that it was a notification to say there was parking ahead, and it had been turned so it looked like that you could park on the pavement. And because it had been turned, whether it had been turned by some wag or by the wind or whatever, it wasn't loose, but it definitely looked like you should be able to park on a pavement. Anyway, she got off, and that was the main thing, and then they removed the sign. Vintage News says, one of my old wedding anniversaries. Not quite sure what he means by that. Perhaps it was the Battle of Britain Day itself is one of your old wedding anniversaries. Marvellous. And that hopefully was a battle that you won quite nicely. Steam Searcher says, we became of a small white van, always parked outside a house on a grassy bit. Not their house, but the neighbours. They lived next door with 3 noisy dogs. He would spend hours working on motorbikes to perfection. His mower is in the worst condition possible. Talk about pollution into other people's gardens. Then one night she came round demanding that Bodgett and Scarpa remove their silly sign. They were signing and moving. On the allotted day I put up a flag and at 1 a.m. and waft her off. Bumped into them in a local shop the other day. You were the reason we moved. I held in the laughter for 150 yards and had to stop the car. Well, there you go. Thank you, David and Lily, for that. Ingram Cars says, I don't really have any battles. I feel at peace not only with myself, but everyone around me. That's not to say that I've never had battles, of course, but I do struggle with weight gain if I'm not very careful. And, of course, that's something a lot of people do struggle with. Kerry Baldwin says, I had a battle this morning with my 5-year-old who didn't want to get up. Oh, my goodness, yes. Tell me about the times you have battles with kids that don't want to get up and they don't want to go to school and this, that and the other. We are babysitting our 2 nephews for 3 days while their parents go to Holland. The 8-year-old is great. If you bribe him or threaten him with taking away a reward. But the 5-year-old just doesn't care. Yes, that's true. I suppose 5-year-olds have yet to be instilled with that sense of what's good and what's bad in terms of bribery and those things that parents can corrupt them with. Will I make it to Saturday? She says, by the way, my brother had a fight with a Spitfire for 2 weeks. Blimey. ago. Christmas present from 2009, finally used. My family and my parents went up in a chaser plane and took a video flying next to the Spitfire. It was spine-tingling, and I wasn't even there. Blimey. Yes, that would have been fun. Susie Davis says, I heard people describe Bomber Command as the forgotten wartime arm of the RAF. In fact, it's Coastal Command in tandem with the RAF Marine, with the RAF Marine Craft Branch and its Air Sea Rescue launches. That is the arm of the RAF, which most people forget completely. Yes, somebody somewhere has got to pull out those poor people who've been ditched into the sea. And a lot of people don't think about that. There is a lot of unfair attention on certain areas of things like that, it's like, I suppose, the refuge collectors are often forgotten about what you pay for in your council tax. You think about, oh yes, well, I'm paying my council tax in case the place catches fire, or that I need the street lamps, but also, you do need your rubbish taken away as well. And Sean's Gardening World says at 2:45 to the commentator, you are correct, there are no tickets, it's free. I think that's to the fact that there are tickets for the funeral, or not tickets for the funeral. And Rita Loy says British had the advantage of chain home, and the fighters had the advantage that the Spitfires could be up in the air by the time the German bombers and the Hurricanes, of course, by the time the German bombers arrived in the Battle of Britain. Yes, we had the advantage because we built this series of radio direction finding towers, the chain home, or radar as we now call it. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for all those comments. Sorry I haven't been reading it terribly well, but what is normal to you? What would you consider normal now? Are we ever going to go back to a normality, or do you fear that normality is challenged and will be continue to be challenged, and perhaps you're of the mind that we're being pushed into some awful what's the opposite of utopia, the opposite of whatever it is, which is I can't remember at the top of the thing. Anyway, never mind all that. Excuse my failings today. Perhaps that's the new normal, picking my nose, fiddling with cups of tea and not being able to express myself. Well, that is fairly normal for me, so there we are, no change there. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed some of it. Until tomorrow, ta-ta.